Hi, friend. Hope you're doing well, and welcome to another episode of the Your Audio Solutions podcast, where it's my mission to find the tools and methods from the people that inspire you so you can apply their knowledge to your own life and work. And on the show today, we have Mirek Stiles from Abbey Road Studios, where he works as the head of audio products. And I'm sure if you have a DAW, you've heard of companies like Waves, Native Instruments, Spitfire Audio, and many others. So he's very involved with them. He works with them to develop their plugins. And we actually delve into, I'm sure you've heard about it, the Abbey Road Studio 3 reference plugin where you can check your mixes on through, what's it called? Abbey Road Studios 3. We talk a bit about that in the interview. It was really interesting finding more about that. But Mirek, he was actually the first runner back when he started in 1998 and eventually worked his way up to assistant engineer before he became the head of audio products, which is his current title. But it was real pleasure talking to Mirek, and it was really fun learning more about the different technologies like audio technologies being developed or that has been developed. For example, single speakers can now play back Dolby Atmos, for example, and be very accurate. And game engines, how that was a really cool thing, especially for artists. And we go into detail in the interview, but Mirek was talking about how artists can, for example, use game engines to mix their music and make it very interactive. And I think that can be really cool for artists to get into. And then as an artist or band, you can not only release the traditional album, the normally stereo mix for people to stream, but also this maybe interactive where people can come closer to your music somehow and just be able to play with it differently. And I thought it was really fascinating and really cool. So it was awesome talking to Mirek and geeking out about audio. So if you're anything like us, you're gonna like this interview too, I hope. But also, before we get into the interview, I'd love for you to check out the Audio Tribe email list. There's a link to that in the description below. Just enter your name and email address and you have joined the Audio Tribe email list. And if you join, you get exclusive access to interviews before the public and also a chance to ask up-and-coming guest questions and a lot more stuff that I like to do in the future as we grow this channel. And also talking about growing the channel, if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, also please hit that subscribe button. The channel is growing slowly but steadily, and that's all thanks to you. So really do appreciate your support. And most importantly, I hope you enjoyed the interviews and that the content is relevant to you and that you're having a good time listening to it and that you learn from it. That's the main goal for this. So please let me know in the comments if you feel like you enjoying the interviews. But that's about it. Let's get into the interview with Mirek Stiles. So please enjoy. I like the background.
Oh yeah, so this is how Studio One used to look when the studios opened in 1931. So it's the old Art Deco going up the side of the wall there, you can see. And They were trying to recreate a concert hall, so there's actually staging at the back, and they'd put seating out on the floor, and because they didn't know any better really. They were like, it was the world's first purpose-built recording studio. So the architects, Wallace and Gilbert, were like, well, that means we need to recreate a concert hall, right? That's what you do.
Exactly.
So that's what they did.
So is that Studio 2 or 1? What
Studio 1, yeah,
right.
Studio 1, the big orchestral room. It looks nothing like that anymore. It's now, well, the Art Deco's not there anymore, unfortunately, but it sounds a lot better. Apparently it used to sound pretty bad when they first opened it up. Like I said, they didn't really know what they were doing at the time. Bit of a dark art still to this day, I suppose, acoustics anyway.
Yeah, exactly, man. But so I guess you're based in London too, right? Or I'm not anymore, but you are.
Yeah. So Abbey Road is St John's Wood, which is a North London district, if you like, of London. and I'm currently not there. No, yeah, we're in a lockdown at the moment, so I'm kind of I'm just on the outskirts of London at the moment.
Nice. But so how have actually Abbey Road dealt with the whole lockdown thing? Did you shut down the first time too, or did you keep rolling?
Well, that initial crazy period back in March, I think it was for us. Yeah, we shut the doors for about 2 months, maybe even 3 months, for the first time ever.
Wow.
Even during the Second World War, the studios remained open. So it was the first time in our 90-year history that we closed. So that was really weird, really weird. But the studio manager and the head of technical and the site facilities manager did like this just amazing job of getting the place open again, you know, as being COVID compliant and making sure everything was as safe as possible, and kind of working out from scratch, if you like, the do's and don'ts, if you like kind of, you know, there was no rule book for this as such. No one had done this before. So it was, everyone was sort of flying by the seat of their pants, really. But like I say, those guys did an amazing job in getting the studios up and running again, from the point of view that, I mean, obviously it wasn't the same, it wasn't normal, it was very much reduced capacity. So to give you an idea, Studio One, the big one behind me, that normally has a capacity of anything from, like, you know, 100 to 200 musicians, if you like. So that was reduced down to 50 musicians, to give you an idea of how much we scaled back. Wow. So 2 meters social distancing between each of the musicians, that sort of thing. So some very wide recordings going on.
How did that affect the orchestral recordings, if you did any still?
Yeah, I mean, so I've asked quite a few engineers about this. I mean, look, it's not ideal. And I think the moment we're allowed to go back to normal, people will go back to normal. But it works. You know, it's you have to work sometimes, you know, even in non-COVID times in the audio industry, recording industry, sometimes you just got to get on with what you've got around you and what you've got in front of you and make it happen, right? So I guess it's no different in that respect.
Right. Makes sense. By the way, I just want to ask you about your name, Mirek. Is it pronounced Mirek or Mirek? No, Mirek.
It's Mirek.
Where's that from? It sounds a bit Eastern European, but I might be completely wrong.
Yeah, no, you're onto something there. No, it's Polish.
That's
Polish.
what I thought, actually.
Yeah. So my mum's dad was Polish. So yeah, I was given a Polish name.
Right, but then your last name sounds very British, right?
Stiles, I suppose so. Yeah, that's quite. I guess that's British. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It sounded British.
What about you? Where are you based?
Well, I used to live in London for the last 7 years.
Okay.
But we just moved to Leeds a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
But I'm originally from Sweden.
Okay. I thought I heard a slight accent there.
Yeah, exactly. No, but yes, I've been there for 7 years. Gone fast, to be honest. It's a bit weird, but
it does. Yeah, it does go fast.
It does. And I saw something fun that we had in common. I saw you or I heard that you're a fan of Brendan O'Brien, the producer.
Yeah. Where did you hear that?
I just saw a random video today about you, and you said you were a fan of his, and just because I didn't know about him growing up, but I listened to like a lot of the records he made. Like the biggest one I listened to, or the biggest one for me, was Blood Sugar, Sex Magic, but Red Hot. Did you like that one, or? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I God, this would have been when I was a teenager, I suppose. I think the first album I heard of his was Pearl Jam Versus.
Right.
So I can't remember how old I was when that came out. Probably 16. And just the sound of the drums, I immediately remember just like, whoa, like that sounds amazing. Just like, because I think the song opened up with this like with a drum beat, you know, very exposed, just on its own pretty much, with a few sort of noises here and there from guitars or what have you. And it's like, I was just blown away by the sound of the drums and throughout the entire album. And then it's one of those things where I started listening to albums from that era, from that genre, if you like, I guess, grunge, so like Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots and what have you. And there would always be the same name I'd see in the credits. So I'd read the credits religiously. it's what you did back then. You listen to an album and flick through the booklet as you listen to the album. So, and the same name was coming up, Brendan O'Brien. It was like a rash all over the music industry, you know, in a good way. And I just loved what I was hearing sound wise, and it didn't really sound like anything else at that time, particularly if you compared that sort of sound, if you like, to maybe the kind of the Britpop thing over here, where I always felt like the drums were kind of a lot further back in the mix and not quite as hard and as punchy, whereas the drum sounds that Brendan O'Brien and the engineering and production teams he was working with just blew me away. It just sounded really fresh and raw and punchy to me, and I just loved it. I just fell in love with that sort of sound. And so yeah, I was, and also he from what, still to this day, from what I can tell, there's not a huge amount out there on him via media or social media, if you like.
Exactly.
So any glimmer of information I could find about, you know, what his process was or all that sort of stuff was like gold dust. And I found bits and pieces out over the years here and there, like he would use like a Y split cable. So he'd have the toms with a top mic and a bottom mic going into a Y cable with the phase reversed on one side, and that would just feed one single preamp into the desk or whatever preamp they're using.
That's smart.
And just to save, I guess, some of the faff, because I mean, off the back of some of that research, I personally am a fan of miking both the top and the bottom. But I've never got down to the Y cable bit. So before you know it, you've got so many microphones and channels. It gets quite messy, but it's worth it though. But yeah, I just personally think you get that lovely attack off the top and that lovely sort of roundness from the bottom, as it were, and blended together. It just makes the drums come alive for me. So anyway, that was a Brendan O'Brien thing I'd read about somewhere and thought, oh, I'll try that, and I tried it, and I sort of got it. It worked for me, and other little things like I read somewhere that he just always uses a SM58 on a hi-hat, because no matter whatever mic you put on a hi-hat, it's just always doesn't sound that great, or is just so low in the mix anyway. So he just started I'm just going to use a SM58. Why not? And again, yeah, why not?
Yeah, totally.
I can't remember. There's other bits and pieces you can find, but anyway, yeah. Long way of saying I just kind of love that kind of sound I was hearing from the drums, especially, but everything else, the whole production was fantastic.
Definitely, yeah, and you're so right with saying, because I've been trying to find any contact info for him to be on this podcast too, but it's nothing. But I had his engineer on last year at some point. Tom, which was awesome, but just to get a hold of Brendan, like there's no manager, there's nothing. It's like almost like Max Martin territory. There's nothing on him either.
Well, if you're listening out there, Brendan, please come on to the show.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd definitely check that podcast out. Yeah,
I'll keep trying, man. But yeah, his productions are awesome. No doubt about that. But actually, something. Because I studied audio myself, and I was really into binaural audio. Like, there's some random paper on it. Doesn't really matter. But I saw another interview with you talking about stereo and the invention of stereo back in the day. And when I was in school, I always wondered, do you think they actually were trying to invent binaural audio but had to settle with stereo? Is that a valid question, in your opinion?
So the story I've heard is stereo was invented by Alan Blumlein. He was a EMI technician, if you like. He was actually employed by EMI, or what would be probably known as the gramophone company back then, to reinvent the wheel. So when Abbey Road opened in 1931, but just like before that, the gramophone company were using a recording system called the Westex recording system, a company based in California, I think. And the way that worked, it was like a licensing model. So if you use their recording system, by that I mean like a microphone, a couple of microphones, a very basic mixing console on a cutting lathe, you had to pay a royalty for every record sold.
Wow.
That was the setup. So when the gramophone company decided to open their own recording studio, they wanted to be independent. They didn't want to be involved in this licensing thing anymore. So they actually hired Alan Blumlein as well as other engineers to reverse engineer the recording process. So microphones, mixing consoles, cutting lathes. So when Abbey Road did open, they were completely independent. So I mean, Alan Blumlein was a genius inventor, innovator. He did a lot of work on radar, and I think he had over 100 patents to his name. You can find him on Wikipedia. But one of the inventions he did patent was stereo. He called it binaural audio, and the legend goes that he was sat in a cinema one evening, and he noticed as when a character walked from one side of the screen to the other, the sound didn't follow. It was just, always coming from the center. So he came up with this concept of binaural, two ears. So he created a stereo microphone, stereo cutting lathes, and it worked. I mean, there is a video on YouTube of him over in his makeshift studio over in Hayes, of him testing this system out, and it does sound very basic, but you over headphones you do hear this slight movement. So and so it works. And that was in 1931. I think he did the first ever music recording in Studio 2 at Abbey Road in 1934, I think it was. So he was playing with it for a little while. But I guess the problem was that the world wasn't ready for it. Everything was mono, radio. The world just wasn't ready. So all the notes were made, and it just all got filed away into the archives, as it were. Because stereo wasn't introduced to the general public till 1955, I think, and it certainly wasn't like mainstream until the late 60s. Up until that point, it would be quite common to release both a mono and a stereo version of the same album, and that's a process that went through into the 60s. I think it was like the late 60s where bands like the Beatles I think it was the White Album was the first album of theirs where they just released it in stereo only, not a mono and stereo. So anyway, what I'm saying is that Alan Blumlein was like way ahead of his time. Too ahead of his time, if you like. But yeah, I mean, he patented stereo binaural as it was back then in 1931. Does that answer your question? I can't remember what the original question was.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, it was. I mean, you answered it because I was asking if they in fact were trying to invent binaural instead of stereo, but I guess it'd be. How did it become stereo?
I think, I mean, binaural stereo, back then it was pretty much the same thing. The binaural you're referring to, where you, over a pair of headphones, where you get that using a dummy head, for example, and get that very realistic out-of-head experience. That I'm not 100% sure on when that came about. That wasn't Alan Blumlein, but some of the terminologies and some of the tools that Alan Blumlein came up with is certainly a part of that part of that binaural world, because he had things like, he had a thing called a shuffler, which was supposed to mimic the filtering between the two ears and things like that, via the face, and he was playing around with things like that. So I'm pretty sure a lot of his work was definitely influential into what binaural became with the whole kind of out of head experience and things like that. Yeah.
That's cool. But what does actually inventing stereo mean? I mean, because I guess, to me, just hearing the word stereo, you don't think about it as one piece of equipment. It just means, well, two speakers or your two ears maybe. So what does it mean to invent stereo? Do you know what I mean?
Well,
I mean,
everything before then would just be, effectively, we're talking about channels, aren't we? One channel. So you'd have one microphone, maybe two, but still just like a mono arrangement, if you like, going into a very basic 1 or 2 channel mixer, but still there's no option to pan, there's no option to move the audio around the sound field. It's just they're up there in the middle. So 1 channel microphone, 1 channel mixing console, if you like, and then definitely a 1 channel cutting lathe, and that was it. So I guess what it means stereo from Alan's point of view was you're adding 2 channels, and hence you have this sound field where you can pan between mono, left and right. So you suddenly opened up this kind of other dimension, I guess, if you like. I think that's right.
Right. Makes sense, I think. So his invention was actually expanding the channel possibility, like the pan ability, rather than adding a speaker. But the speaker came with it, I guess.
Well, no, speaker, of course, as well. Yeah, so it was everything. So he had to instead of having a 1 channel cutting lathe, he needed a cutting lathe that cut 2 channels left and right. So yeah, and then obviously 2 speakers and 2 microphones and a mixing console that could handle with 2 microphones. That sort of thing. In fact, actually, when I say 2 microphones, his first microphone, it was just like a single microphone with 2 capsules, kind of, pointing. So, yeah, I think that summarizes it. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So that means, so in fact, he invented everything from the microphone all the way down to the cutting lathe.
Well, he had to. Yeah, no one else was going to do it for him.
Wow.
It was long before that. You couldn't just go out and buy anything like that. I mean, that was the early days of recording, where pretty much if you wanted it, you had to build it. So a lot of these labels, Decca and many others, they built their own gear. They built their own consoles. They built because that was the way it was done. There was no commercial mixers or tape machines. Certainly in the early days, there were obviously companies like Neumann had microphones out in the early days, although maybe not in the very, very early days. EMI would make their own microphones in the early days as well. So in those very early days of recording, it was pretty bootstrappy, You just, you built it yourself and got on with it.
It's so interesting thinking about Blumlein inventing all this, and somehow ends up in a consumer's living room. So some company must have picked it up and then started selling a pair of speakers rather than selling 1, I guess. And then they sort of took off. That's how I see it in my head. But
yeah, who knows what the exact timeline was or the way it rolled out. But I guess it's like anything. There would have been early adopters. It would have been very low key at first, and there would have been people, I guess, who were better off.
Right.
Got this new thing called stereo. Check it out, and blow your friends away and all that sort of stuff. In the living room, what have you. That's it's no different to now, I suppose. There's always early adopters, right? And then hopefully it takes off from there.
Exactly, man. Yeah, it works exactly like today. You're completely right. But what's that? I don't know if it has a name or not, but this tool you guys have, AI tool that sort of can go to a mono mix and sort of dissect instruments, so you can sort of filter out the vocals, drums from a mono source. What's that all about? 'Cause that sounds cool.
Yeah, so source separation. It's quite a hot topic at the moment, and what I mean by that is there's a few companies doing it to varying degrees of kind of a quality, I guess, if you like. But one of the Abbey Road engineers, a guy called James Clark, came up with his own algorithm for this source separation. And in fact, it's what you say. So you can take a mono signal, a mono recording, and you can get this algorithm to learn the drums, learn the bass. You can give it examples, so you can show this recording a drum recording or a separate drum recording, a separate bass recording. It learns and then it's able to separate the frequencies out from the drums, from the bass, the guitar, the vocal, or whatever. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's pretty amazing what you can do, especially from a point of view of doing a remix. If you want to mix a mono recording, and you've only got access to the mono recording, it doesn't exist in any other way, and maybe doing a sort of surround mix of it, or it's good for kind of forensic kind of stuff, like if some recordings have got like loads of audience noise over them. It was used a lot on the last Beatles film to kind of take out the crowd noises from things like Shea Stadium, and it worked really very well for that.
Was that the one coming out this year, or the one with
no,
Jackson?
it's already been out.
Okay. Oh, the Scorsese one? Did he do one?
No, a couple of years ago. Anyway, it's a tool that allows you to dissect recordings a bit more in ways that you couldn't do before, and as you've got no other option, and it's getting better all the time, and it's a pretty incredible tool when you think about it and what it's doing.
Definitely. And
incredibly useful. And it's been used on quite a few commercial releases now. At Abbey Road, it's a service we provide.
Right. So that tool is only available through you guys at Abbey Road, I guess.
Well, we have our version of it, which we think is very good. But like I say, there are there's other versions of it out. It's one of those things. It's like that sort of technology where there's a few players out there all doing their own kind of interpretation of it. So, yeah.
But what is your thoughts on the whole AI? Because it's inevitable that, I mean, it's already here, so there's no point of, asking if it's going to come, because it's here. But where do you think it can take music production and recording and all that? Do you think it can free up people to do more creativity or more creative stuff and be more creative? What's your thoughts on that?
I absolutely do think that. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of scaremongering about AI, and in some respects, probably quite rightly so. But from a music production point of view, I think it's going to augment the creative process, or it is already augmenting the creative process. So, like you say, kind of allowing you to kind of focus your brain energy on something else, or maybe if you've got a bit of, like a writer's block or production block, if you like, it can assist someone to riff off, even though that you're not riffing off a person, you're riffing off of a piece of software. So yeah, I think it's a way of augmenting the creative process. Absolutely. I think we're going to see a lot more of it, and it isn't anything to be scared of. I mean, I think an analogy I like to make is when MIDI first came onto the scene back in the early 80s. There was a bit of scaremongering about that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think musicians were worried that they were going to suddenly not be needed anymore because there's these synthesizers that can supposedly recreate the sound of a guitar or a violin. And I think even the musicians' union got involved in
wow.
MIDI couldn't be used in certain situations and things like that. I mean, obviously none of that exists now. It's all fine, and it was all kind of unfounded in a way. But off the back of that MIDI kind of explosion, this new genre, if you like, came out. The synth wave, if you like, during the 80s. It kind of created this whole new sound, and AI will probably be no different. There already is AI. It's AI generated music already.
Are you familiar with the Amper? The company
yes.
Amper?
Yeah.
I had the founder on last year as well, and like what you said, I mean, their AI, whatever you call it, is making music, and his mission, or whatever you want to call this, is very interesting because, he wants to free up people, I guess, and make AI do like what he calls like low tier level music. But I guess that also, I can see how that can scare people off, because that was usually a human being making money, maybe doing a song for a wedding video, for example. But now this AI can do it for you. So I guess I can understand some people being like, oh shit, does that mean I'm going to earn less money making library music, for example? But still, what they're doing is super cool.
Yeah. I mean, like anything, there will be a bit of disruption, I imagine. That's inevitable, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see where it all goes.
Exactly. And then we have, what's the other company really famous? The mastering tool.
Lander.
Yeah. I mean, what they're doing is cool as
Yeah,
well.
there's Lander, there's Cloud Bounce.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, AI, automatic mastering, whatever you want to call it. There's definitely room for it. It doesn't replace a mastering engineer by any stretch of the imagination. Just the experiments we've done at Abbey Road, comparing what a real engineer would have done versus what this algorithm does, and it's very, very different output. I guess the algorithm is a bit more generic and didn't sound as satisfying to us.
right.
In any way stretch of the imagination. It was almost like a one size fits all sort of thing. It didn't feel very personalized, and definitely kind of big differences we were hearing, between the human version and the algorithm version. But having said that, if you've got a demo going or whatever, and you want to send it off to someone, or in certain situations, why not? I mean, if you can just get something, give it a quick mastering,
Yeah, sure.
why not? I mean, I don't want to criticize stuff like that. It has its place.
Yeah, because isn't it about who wants the service? I guess, because I guess people using Lander are usually home, whatever it's called, home studio owners, maybe not, but musicians that just play around at home, essentially, who don't really need a mastering engineer to release their song on Spotify. Even they can just use Lander, but maybe more serious people will go to a real mastering engineer and recording and mixing engineer.
Yeah, and then there's kind of tiers, I guess, if you like, in between. I mean, you can come to Abbey Road, for example, and do an attended mastering session, or you can use the Abbey Road online mastering service, where it's still being mastered by a horrible saying, a real mastering engineer, but a human being. It's still being mastered by a human being.
Yeah.
But it's done remotely. You don't have to, if you can't get to the studios, or you're on the other side of the world, or whatever, you can upload your files, and it still gets, and you can choose your mastering engineer, that sort of thing. So, there's varying degrees in between as well. It's not like one size fits all. Ever.
Exactly. Because you guys also work a lot with waves, right?
Yes.
Are you involved a lot with waves, or is it another?
Yeah, no, that's me, I guess. Yeah, I'm guilty for that one. Yeah.
No, because that's been a huge collaboration, of course. And last year you released that I forgot the name, but you can listen to your mixes through, I don't know which studio it is anymore, but you can play it
Studio
through,
3.
right,
NX,
right.
Studio 3 NX. Yeah.
So is it really, because obviously you've tried both, you work at Abbey Road, so Studio 3, but would you say it's accurate and a nice experience?
It's very accurate. You definitely get that sense of energy of music moving through the air in front of you, as opposed to over a pair of headphones. This is so obviously normally when you listen to when you listen to music over a pair of headphones, you got sound in the right blasting directly into the right ear, and sound in the left and right is blasting into each ear directly. There's no crosstalk in between. It's very inside the head, which is fine, but for mixing, it's very difficult to mix like that when you're not getting any crosstalk. It's very difficult to judge levels of anything in the center, and center's pretty important. Vocals, kick drum, bass guitar, snare drum, etc. So the center's really important. So if you're mixing over a pair of headphones, you're not really getting a true center image. You're kind of, because it's all collapsed inside the head with direct into each ear. So you're not getting you're not getting a true center. So anyway, with the NX software, what it does is it takes the sound from outside of the headphones and places it in front of you, and you get the crosstalk from the left speaker and the right speaker. But you've also modeled the speakers and the room itself, so you kind of get this environment, if you like, as if you're sat inside a real room, hearing music through a pair of speakers, but over a pair of headphones. And you've got different sound fields as well. So you've got the big Quest Eds up in the wall, pair of B&W 800 series in surround sound as well, so 5.1 and 7.1, and also a pair of near fields as well, sort of sat on the console. So you kind of got those sound fields to play with. So as if you're sat inside, the real Studio 3 mix room. And Studio 3 is a fantastic mix room. It's a really, really great room in terms of you can kind of trust it. Kind of what you're hearing in that room it seems to translate very well to the outside world. So,
but how is that made? I mean, I don't know. You probably can't go into all the details, but how does a program like that come to be? Like, what's the technologies involved making? Because in my head, I think, oh, maybe just use a dummy head to record, but I guess there's more to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the binaural process. What we were talking about earlier on, that kind of binaural of taking sound from outside of the head. So there's that process, and then there's the room modeling. So you kind of blending impulse responses of the ears and how the ears listen, blended with impulse responses of what the room is doing, and blending those together. And we used a lot of high order ambisonic recordings, room capturing impulses through the speakers using high order ambisonic microphones. A crazy amount of mathematics involved underneath the hood, and it was to give you an idea of how accurate it was, it's kind of ambisonic, high order ambisonic microphones on I've forgotten the name of the company now, but there's these remote control stands, and you can turn it a degree at a time. So, right. That's a lot of recordings, a lot of measurements, each degree. So it was a bit of a beast, and it took us a while to get there. I mean, a lot of R&D was involved, and it really wasn't a case of like the first attempt, great guys, we've nailed it. It took a few attempts and a bit of head scratching, and we spent quite a few days in Studio 3, but we got there in the end, and I think the results are amazing. And again, that's one of those things where that there's, when we released it, I think we were maybe the first to release an actual room emulation for that type of product tool. But now there's others out there now. It's like, I wouldn't say everyone jumped on the bandwagon, but there's a few others out there as well. Things like that. So it's obviously something that people find useful because the world isn't perfect, and audio recording and mixing is no exception. We quite often find ourselves on a laptop in a room, and you haven't got a beautifully acoustically treated room or a fantastic pair of speakers, and you've just got to get in there and get on with the job. So software like that can be very, very helpful in those situations, and also it's just a reality check. I think it's another tool in your arsenal for mixing. So people, I don't know if people still do it anymore, but there used to be a big thing of you print your mix and take it out into the car park and listen to the mix in your car, to see what it sounds like in your car, and you play it over a little hi-fi system, or you know, up in the lounge or something. You know, so it just gives you an overall impression of where your mix is going. And software like that is just another tool in your arsenal for sense checking.
Definitely. But how does it work when you model the speakers or whatever you want to call it? Is it a lot of like playing back white noise, pink noise, whatever, and modeling, or is it more complex than that? I guess it is.
No, I mean it's yeah. I mean, Waves have got some pretty exotic test tones.
Oh yeah.
Which they fire out. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on.
Right.
But no, yeah, you're energized. Yeah, like any impulse response, you need to energize the room, right, to get the impulse. So yeah, yeah, there's quite a lot of different variations and kind of quite exotic test tones going on. So yeah, it's a pretty thorough process.
Nice. So what's an exotic test tone? And I mean, I'm thinking.
I don't know.
Are you not allowed to hear it?
No, I can hear it, but it's just it's varying degrees of different frequencies,
right.
white noise, pink noise, different levels, different bursts, timings, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, that whole world it's complicated. I
Very.
had Nikolai forgot how to pronounce his last name, but I think he also worked at Abbey Road Institute a bit as a lecturer and acoustic audio. Like did plugins for them, and we spoke a lot about impulse responses and stuff. Like Acoustica does, because they do it differently. That someone else, like you get the waves and whatever. But that world is complicated.
Yeah, I mean it is and it isn't. I mean, things like Altiverb they've been around for a while. If you just want to like do a normal impulse response, for want of a better way of describing it, in a room. I mean, it's pretty easy to do, right. With something like Altiverb. I mean, back in the early 2000s, maybe even the late 90s, Sony had this device called the Sony S777, which is a big, heavy unit. But it was a way of capturing impulse responses, and at the end of the day, you're firing a sweep tone. And through a speaker, as loud as possible without obviously distorting, to energize the room, and you pick it up with a couple of microphones or however microphones you're using. And the software, or in this case the hardware, kind of does its magic. You hit the process button and there you've got it. You got your room fingerprint, if you like. So it's been around for a while, and yeah, I've had a lot of fun over the years capturing room sounds, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's people who do that, they seem to love it. I never done it myself, but it sounds fun if you can do your own samples. That sounds like a nice thing to do, actually.
Yeah, so EMI when EMI existed as a as the label. Back in the day, as it were, it does exist now to a certain extent. But right. EMI used to own Abbey Road Studios, Olympic Studios, and Townhouse Studios, all in London. Townhouse was the first to sort of go, as it were, but they kept Olympic up until pretty much the last days of EMI. Right. But they did sell it. It was it's still there. It's a beautiful building down in Barnes, down in South London. It's now a cinema, I think. I think they kept maybe one of the studios, but the bigger studios have been turned into a cinema. But anyway, before the keys were finally handed over to the new owners or whoever, I went in there and pinged all the rooms, because they were great sounding rooms, and I just felt like we should, preserve them as best we can. So I went in there with everything I could: software, hardware, microphone, surround, impulse responses, stereo, mono. I just did as much as I could, and with microphones close to the speaker, mid, far field, all that sort of stuff. Just as many different captures as I could, really, just to capture it all before. And it was quite a big project because there was 3 studios and an echo chamber.
Wow.
But yeah, that was fun. That was kind of I mean, sad as well in a way, but
Sure.
yeah, definitely sad, but also it was nice to be able to at least do that.
Definitely, I can see that. But so let's talk to you about real time engines, like because I've saw that on your LinkedIn profile. You know, you said you think real time engines will play a major role in the future of music production.
Yeah.
But first of all, what is real time engines? I don't really know what that is.
So a real time engine, I mean, game engines effectively. But I've noticed people are starting to refer to them as real time engines now because it's not just games being made to create. It's not just games being made using game engines anymore. So,
Right.
and what I mean by that is, I mean, obviously things like virtual reality, but even things like architectural design, any 3D environment really. So not just gaming. People started referring to them as real-time engines, but effectively, it's a blank 3D canvas, if you like, that you can populate with graphics and code that allows you to navigate your way through those graphics and interact with those graphics as you would do in a video game or a computer game. And add sound to those objects or to the environment. So it's like a blank 3D canvas where you can create, you know, any world you like. I guess only the imagination is the only limiting factor there. And you know, two of the prominent players really. I mean, big AAA. Game companies that they've got their own in-house engines, game engines, but there are two that are quite widely available, which are also used to create commercial games. So that's Unity and the Unreal Engine, and they both pretty much do the same thing. In a way, it's kind of like a very bad analogy, maybe, but you know, Logic versus Pro Tools, if you like. You know, they're kind of doing the same thing, but they do some things better than others or something slightly different than others, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, Unity and Unreal Engine are the two kind of the big players. And so what you've got is you've got a few things coming together. So you've got the game engine, real-time engine, and then you've got this concept of spatial audio, binaural audio, and the concept of 6 degrees of freedom. So what I mean by that is that you can have, if you can picture like a gamified recording studio, if you like, picture a recording studio in your brain, and then think of a game version of that, where it's graphics and renders and all that sort of stuff, and you've got like a drum kit in one corner of the room, and you've got a bass guitar, a singer, maybe even renders or avatars of the musicians or what have you. Anyway, so as the band is playing, you can kind of walk around that performance as it's being played. So and the audio will change depending on where you are, what you're looking at, what you're interacting with. So you could wander up to the drums, and the drums will get louder. You can wander behind the drums. You could even sort of kneel down and put your ear up to the graphic of the kick drum and hear more of the kick drum. Go right up to the vocalist and get a very intimate kind of vocal sound. It's a way of exploring the audio, I guess. So what I've been experimenting with is taking, for example, I worked with film and video game composer Stephen Barton, and also Dr. Hyun-Kook Lee from Huddersfield University, and Dr. Gavin Kearney from York University. And we've done a lot of experimenting together. So we recorded a band in Studio 3, a jazz band. We recorded a string octet in Studio 2. They played Edna Rigby. So the idea being is that you kind of capture the recording in a way that captures not only, you know, spot mics like you would for any normal recording, but you also capture 3D representations of the room and 3D representations of the middle of the room and the outside of the room. So you can take those ambisonic or mono objects or stereo objects and place them inside the game. So when you wander around the room, if you go to the corner of the room, it sounds more roomy and more reverberant, as it would do in real life. Or you wander right up to the violins and stick your head up to the violins, you kind of hear the bow on the string almost. Or you can stand in the middle of the room and get more of a balanced overall sound. So you're kind of free to explore the musical performance. And I've also done it with old recordings as well. I've taken like an old 4-track of it was a Rod Stewart recording done in Studio 3 with Jeff Beck. So it was 4-track, like I say. So it was separate drums, separate vocals, separate guitar, and the bass and the piano was on the same track, but I could just sort of blend, filter them out a little bit. But I put speakers in the room and reamped the entire recording through speakers using Ambisonic microphones and close microphones and spatial arrays, and that worked really well. I just attached the drums to a graphic of a drum kit, attached the vocal to a graphic that looked nothing like Rod Stewart, but it still looked like someone in front of a microphone. And again, you could just wander through the recording. So it kind of works both ways. You can take catalog material and rework it in a way that allows you to experience that recording in a way you've never ever experienced it before. That's or cool. You can do like a fresh recording with that in mind, and again you still get this very unique experience. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's still early days, and I think the learning curve is quite steep from a traditional recording engineer's point of view. What I mean by that is, I think anyone can learn it, obviously, but if you going from a DAW like Ableton into a game engine like Unity is quite a steep learning curve. It's a bit of a different kettle of fish.
I can imagine.
And there's so many different tools out there that can handle not so many different. There's a few different options out there that can handle the audio. Some better than others. Ambisonic microphones. Not that you definitely don't need ambisonic microphones. You can still create good experiences without them, but they do help. And different spatial clusters of microphones. So say taking microphones we know, say like an AKG 414, and arranging several of those in clusters, so you're picking up not only the sound from in front, but also from behind and from above and from below, and then encoding that in a way that you can place inside a game engine. All of these little things take a bit of playing around with and getting used to. So what I mean when I say early days, I think people are still exploring techniques and methods that work. But I guess bigger picture, what I'm envisaging is more artists, producers, engineers using software like Unreal or Unity to express themselves, to express their art, to express their music in ways that hasn't really been possible before. I mean, there's early adopters, artists like Bjork have got some really cool VR experiences where you can walk through her world, if you like. It's like the next level of the concept album. And then if you've got like great audio, great spatial audio, like great coders, great graphics, AI even, you put those tools, those pillars together, those elements together. And I think we're going to start seeing some very, very interesting music experiences moving into the future. I think it's really exciting. It's the old way of working, if you like. Not that that's going to go anywhere. There will still be recording and mixing inside a DAW, and then that's it. That's your end point. But for me, recording and mixing inside a DAW, and then you create your stems, your assets you like in the DAW, and then you import those assets into the game engine, and the game engine is kind of like where I'm doing my final mix now.
Right.
That's where I'm doing my final tweaks. Level, panning. Yeah, level panning. Yeah, it's a mix, but you're doing it inside a 3D environment as opposed to a 2D environment.
I mean, the whole thing sounds super interesting. But how? So if I understand it correctly, you do your traditional recording, and if you want to capture the binaural data, whatever you want to call it, you would use those ambisonic mic, and then you would still do it in Pro Tools, for example, but as you said, you would then export it to the assets in whatever developer kit, whatever you want to call it, you're using, like Unreal. Is that how it's done?
Yeah. So
Right.
in Pro Tools and in Reaper, a few of the other DAWs, you can work. You can use ambisonic tracks.
I didn't know that.
So yeah. So I mean, ambisonics, for those who don't know, it's a very useful way of capturing a 3D recording from a single point. So you put up an ambisonic microphone in a room, and it will pick up very precise 3D recording from all around. So in front of you, above you, below you, behind you.
Yeah, I never worked with a mic like that, so I never experienced them actually. But is it just
that again, that's another example. I mean, that technology's been around since the mid-70s. It was invented by a guy called Michael Curzon out of Oxford University. And yeah, this is the mid-70s, and it's only more recently with things like VR where someone worked out, oh wow, that's actually quite useful for VR. We can use this ambisonic technology. Unfortunately, Michael Curzon isn't around, and I don't think he hasn't been around for a while, so you never would have seen his invention, if you like, being, I wouldn't say mass adopted yet, but it's definitely finding a home now.
That's
Whereas
cool.
when he invented it in the mid-70s, it was really, really like even more niche than now. It was there were ambisonic microphones available. I think Cowrick came out with one in the mid-70s, and Abbey Road actually did it. Well, Abbey Road were early adopters of ambisonics, but and there's still a couple of those old Cowrick at Abbey Road, like serial number 3 and 4 or something crazy.
Cool.
but it just never found a home. It wasn't. I mean, I think the record industry tried to make quad a success around that time, so adding a rear, left, and right speaker.
Right.
And most famously, Dark Side of the Moon was mixed by Alan Parsons in quad. But people just weren't ready for it. There were a few commercial releases in the quad format, and I'm sure they sold a few quad systems, but it wasn't like mass adopted, and it was a bit of a failure. It sort of died a death, really, and so it wasn't the best time for someone else to come out with this other format saying, "Ta-da, look what I've done," and the record labels were probably like, "Well, no, we're all right, thanks." So yeah, that's just another example of someone being way ahead of their time, I think. Anyway, so Ambisonics has kind of found a home now, and DAWs like Reaper and Pro Tools have got ambisonic tracks, ambisonic channels, if you like. So it's kind of finding a home and being used to great effect in gaming and in virtual reality.
But so, what's the end product? Do artists have to release the music as a game for people to be able to listen to this? Because I guess it's not something you would stream on Spotify, right?
Well, I mean, no, not necessarily on Spotify yet. But there's examples of ambisonics on YouTube.
Right, and that's still good.
You can upload first order ambisonics onto YouTube, which is 4 channels.
Right.
And head tracked and all that. So you may have seen some videos where you can on YouTube where you can use the mouse and pan the image around, and the audio pans around kind of with it. And as you kind of move your head, the audio it's kind of all head tracked and follows an experience of what it would be like in the real world.
Right.
But in terms of how does the end user experience it, I mean, yeah, there's platforms like the Steam platform and Oculus platform where you put on your headset and you can find these cool experiences, within their world. And apps, even there's all sorts of ways of releasing this stuff.
Right.
So
it's a bit
yeah,
about
I mean,
artists having to think a bit outside the traditional way of releasing the music, I guess, too, right?
Yeah, I mean, this all kind of ties in slightly, but I mean, there's binaural stuff on Spotify if you look hard enough.
Right.
I think Kraftwerk definitely released a box set, and there's they call them 3D headphone mixes, I think.
Right.
I mean, it's not all head tracked and all that sort of stuff, but you still get that kind of out of head experience. And then it's obviously things like Dolby Atmos over headphones now. The Sony 360 Reality over headphones. That's all done. That's via an app on your phone, for example. So it's out there. There's ways of experiencing this 3D audio, not only through game engines, but also things like Dolby Atmos and all that sort of stuff. Wow. Sound bars as well, of course. So there's the Amazon Echo studio speaker that's got Dolby Atmos. So that's a way of hearing sound beyond stereo, but it's from a single unit, if you like.
How does that work, by the way? Like, because that's, to me, in my head, it seems like if you want to listen to this, you need more than a pair of speakers, or like you said, even just a Amazon Echo thing. It seems like you need more than that.
Yeah. So what it is what a lot of companies are doing. Sennheiser, Amazon, Sonos, etc. You got speakers that are kind of up firing and side firing, and they kind of rely on the reflections from the ceiling and from the walls in a way, mixed with algorithms, some clever DSP as well that kind of helps trick the ear. And you're definitely getting sound that goes from just in front of you to kind of all around you. I heard early examples of the Amazon Echo speaker, and I was pretty impressed by what I was hearing. I mean, it wasn't like being sat inside a fully fledged pumping Dolby Atmos cinema. Don't get me wrong, but you definitely had this experience of sound from all around you, from a single unit. It's quite impressive. And then there is technology that I've heard early examples of it, and I think we are going to see it in the near future of binaural over speakers.
Wow.
So, like, if you can imagine a sound bar with a camera, and it kind of can see your ears.
Wow.
And if you move your head, it will change the beam of very precise beam forming sound to each ear and all that sort of stuff, and it works. So that's another way of, from a single speaker or sound bar, if you like, you're hearing very, very convincing sound pan all around you. So 3D. I mean, 3D audio is quite a big subject. So whether that's 3D audio for gaming, 3D audio for things like Dolby Atmos or cinema sound bars. Over headphones, music over headphones. This 3D audio is quite a big, broad subject, but they're all kind of more or less doing the same thing, which is providing sound all around you. Not only in front but above, below, behind, and giving you this all-encompassing sound as you would do in the real world.
Exactly.
If someone's sounding, we use sound to fill in the blanks, as it were. The field of vision is 110 degrees at best. So if someone's behind you and they call your name, and that's how so your brain uses sound to fill in the blanks that you can't see. And effectively, what a lot of this technology doing is trying to recreate that. It's trying to give you that out of head real sound experience that you get in the real world, but over a pair of headphones in a creative music environment.
It's so fascinating, man. But so, talking about those, like being able to use one speaker that can track you and all that, like what sort of technologies are we talking about being used there, or is that just company secrets, or what is all that made up from?
Well, I'm no scientist, but from what I've seen, it's very precise beam forming of audio. I mean, you can fire audio very precisely to certain areas of a room, and that technology is getting better all the time, mixed with a camera that can see you and what you're doing and where your head is turning. And sort of, this is going to sound incredibly basic to whoever's actually developing it. They're pretty frowning right now, going, it's not that simple. But it's kind of, effectively that's what you're doing. You're firing very precise beams of audio, and the speaker knows where you're at, and what you're doing and what direction you're facing and where your ears are and all that sort of stuff. That's one way of doing it. But like I say, there's also the other way of doing it where you've got side speakers and up firing speakers and all that sort of stuff, and it's using room reflections and there'll probably be a time when both those technologies merge together and give you some crazy super experience. I mean, who knows? It's still early days with all of this, I think. But
it's exciting, to be honest.
It is exciting from the point of view that sound beyond stereo used to be very, very inconvenient. People in their front rooms would have these 5.1 systems, and there'd always be like a door in the way, or someone had their subwoofer wired up to their center speaker and all this sort of stuff. It was a lot of just inconvenient. Obviously cinema's a different story. You go into a cinema, they it's all set up for that. That's what they do. Cinema's been experimenting with surround sound since the 30s. With Disney had Fantasound for the film Fantasia. It wasn't widely released, but there was definitely a roadshow that travelled around the US, and there was an array of speakers around the audience, and I don't know, when Mickey Mouse casts a spell or whatever, the harp would pan around the audience. So that's been around. Cinema have always been at the forefront of trying to go beyond stereo or mono or what have you. But anyway, what I'm saying from a domestic point of view and from a music creator's point of view as well, even it's now a lot more convenient. You can get very convincing, fantastic experiences over a pair of headphones, or from these sound bars. So there's no need to have this specialist amp and speakers all around the room and all that sort of stuff anymore. People still do that, and obviously that gives you a different experience, but it's now a lot more convenient. I think that's what's exciting, because before it wasn't convenient at all.
Yeah, it also sounds like companies pay more attention to audio, because it's always been, or I felt that it's always been the last thing that gets cared about, right? But now it seems that a lot of companies are, bragging about, like, just look at the PlayStation 5, they're bragging about 3D binaural audio, whereas
absolutely, I couldn't agree more. That is a really good point. I was really happy when I watched that that announcement from Mark, I've forgotten his second name. The PlayStation announcement. This is a launch for a gaming console, effectively, and they're talking about ambisonics and 3D audio for all, and talking about how the sound chip on the PS5, the Tempest audio engine, is more powerful than the entire PS4 combined. It's like,
wow, I didn't know that.
Whoa, it's like you guys are taking this very seriously, and I think that's amazing, absolutely amazing. I'm very excited to see what that system can do and what people do with that technology.
Definitely.
You can have thousands of audio objects, from what I can tell, using the Sony Tempest audio engine. So each rain droplet has its own dedicated piece of audio.
Wow,
it's pretty powerful stuff.
But do you think all this cool stuff with audio is always more for sound effects or Foley stuff rather than music? Because when I listen to binaural music, it just feels a bit, do you really need it? Because at least in my opinion, you like music to be sort of static, like you mentioned, you want the bass in the middle, vocals in the middle, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But I guess it could be cool with a guitar flying around every now and then. But do you think it's
yeah?
Yeah. Do you think it's
this is it? It doesn't have to be all singing, all dancing. Look, the 6 Degrees of Freedom experience I was talking about using real-time engines. That is what it is. It is 3D audio. You wander around a room. The audio changes depending on what you're looking at, what direction you're facing, what you're interacting with, even whether you're kind of crouching down or standing up, that sort of thing. But from a purely, I don't know, traditional audio point of view, if you like, then no, you're right. You're still probably going to want the vocals and the bass and the kick drum in the center. But as you suggested, it's kind of cool to maybe, that synth pad or that guitar lick or that solo. Let's put that through a binaural panner, and let's have that moving around a little bit outside the head. So you can blend the two together. Still have your kick drum stereo, but and inside the head over a pair of headphones, but have the guitars outside of the head, and all sorts of experiments people are doing or can be doing or should be doing, playing around with these binaural panners, and they're a lot of them you can just download and start playing with them.
Nice. And that all gets encoded to a stereo file in the end.
Exactly.
Wow.
So I mean, the only thing where there could be slight difficulties is, and I'm not convinced it would be crazy, is that you obviously wouldn't get that effect if someone was listening to that music over a pair of speakers. You'd only really get the effect over a pair of headphones.
Right, but that's a good way for artists to, almost repackage their music a bit. Have one headphone specific experience that take binaural into account.
Yeah.
That's a cool thing.
So yeah, I mean, it really realistically, it's only the last couple of years where a lot of these panners and Ambisonic microphones and Ambisonic encoders, decoders, and game engine audio rendering tools that can handle this. It's only the last sort of 2 or 3 years where they've kind of started to come out of the woodwork, as it were. So really, at the end of the day, it's still early days, and people are still experimenting, finding their feet. But it does all feel like it's kind of going somewhere, and it's becoming a lot more open. And even as you said, audio does seem to be taking. I mean, audio's always been taken seriously. Don't get me wrong, but it seems like now it's a hotter topic, as it were. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, even with these AirPods, whatever it's called,
yeah,
they just really updated them to spatial audio too, and that
exactly.
was a big update, and that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. I tried it quickly, and yeah, it seems to be working fine. It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spatial audio is definitely a hot topic at the moment. Yeah.
But how is that different from 3D audio?
Well,
Really?
exactly. This is it. I mean, so
Right.
there's all these different terminologies flying around.
Right.
It's kind of weird, but I think I'm pretty sure everyone's kind of saying the same thing: 3D audio, spatial audio, Dolby Atmos. I mean, it's kind of all doing the same sort of stuff, giving the same sort of experience, which is an out-of-head experience, and sound from above, below, front, behind, as opposed to just left and right. But yeah, it's different. This is it. I mean, there's a lot of people using different terminologies, but more or less saying the same thing. So it's still a little bit Wild Westy at the moment. I guess that's what I'm saying.
But doesn't that go back to my initial question, where if Alan Blumlein were trying to create binaural audio, whatever you want to call it, isn't that all? I mean, that's what they're still trying to do. They just call it 3D spatial whatever, right?
I guess so. I mean, I guess that's an interesting analogy. If you're saying that Alan Blumlein called it binaural, but now we call it stereo, and you say spatial audio, I say 3D audio. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, there's a bit of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
You say tomato, I say tomato, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But is there anything like you guys are working on now that you can give us a nugget of that is a cool thing coming out, whatever that might be?
Absolutely not. Everything is top secret.
Is it?
In what regards? I mean,
like say maybe you guys are doing something with Waves or any other company you're working on.
Yeah, I mean,
with...
there's stuff on its way. Exciting stuff on its way, definitely. I mean, what I do, I work with Waves and Channel Limited on hardware, and more recently with Spitfire Audio doing samples. So there's a lot more coming. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well,
I can't tell you what though.
No, that's fine, man. I'm actually gonna have the Spitfire Audio guys on in a few weeks. So
brilliant.
I'll see what they say.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, they're great guys.
Yeah, awesome, man. But it's been a real pleasure having you on, and it's really exciting. And yeah, thanks for sharing all your knowledge and all that fun, exciting audio stuff.
Absolute pleasure. I hope it was interesting, and I just realised this light is like crazy. Like my face is like glowing. Right. I hope that's worked out right for you. Anyway,
yeah, it'll be okay.
No, it's been fun, man. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mirek. Awesome having you here, and hope you, the listener, enjoyed this interview as well. Again, feel free to check out the Audio Tribe email list. Just enter, or actually, first of all, first click the link in the description below, then enter your name and email address, and you have joined the Audio Tribe email list. If you join, you get exclusive access to interviews before the public, chance to ask up-and-coming guest questions, and also if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're listening to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please hit that subscribe button too. Your support really matters, and I really appreciate your support. The channel is growing slowly but steadily, and that's all thanks to you. So yeah, I really appreciate your support in this channel. And most importantly, I hope you enjoy the content, of course. Oh shit. Keep knocking this microphone stand. Should be okay. But yeah, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you next week. So have a good week and take care.